Domestic violence is real. It affects women, men, children, and families from walks of all life. It knows no boundaries and affects many people regardless of their wealth, their status, their cultural heritage, their race, or their religion. Over the course of the next hour, we're going to talk about domestic violence and the resources available to you and your loved ones. Domestic violence doesn't always affect adults. In fact, children are the hidden victims. The Domestic Violence Resource Center estimates 3 to 10 million children here in the U.S. witness domestic violence every year. Our first two panelists are all too familiar with the painful and vicious cycle of this kind of abuse. I'd like to welcome now Anita Birmingham from the Bronx and Dr. Nellie Maceda, a pediatric attending physician at Montefiore Medical Center. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us this evening and for having the courage to share your stories with us. Anita, I'd like to start with you. In your home as a child, your stepfather was your abuser. Talk to me about the relationship you had with him.
I shouldn't have been at that age.
Now, you were one of 4 girls living in your home at the time, correct?
Yes.
And you were the only one being abused, is that right?
Yes, because I wasn't his child.
What do you mean by that? You weren't
I was
his
his stepdaughter. It's just been very hard.
When you see that you're the only one who's being abused in this situation, do you ever ask yourself, why me?
Yes, I have. To this day, I still, that little child that didn't have the voice still asks, why me? I believe I'm a very beautiful person, and I didn't deserve what I got. I had my childhood taken away. I had to grow up before my time.
What was the breakthrough for you? How did you escape this abuse?
When I turned 17, and I'm still here.
Well, we're glad that you're here.
Thank you
for that. But your experience was actually very different from Dr. Maceda's. Dr. Maceda, you were witnessing the abuse in your home, correct?
Correct. I was raised by a single mother who really didn't have emotional or psychological capabilities. After 20 years of marriage, he shot and killed her and shot himself.
Did you ever feel guilty living
Always.
in an environment like that?
Always.
And how did you cope?
I believe that my anxiety, I channeled that energy into studying child.
How lucky do you feel to have been able to escape this and be successful and be the doctor that you are today?
I have to say that because I'm a physician, I understand a little bit more about neuroscience, the science of the brain, etc. Lucky is the operative word. I mean, it's difficult to concentrate when you're feeling.
Let's fast forward now. Anita, talk to me about the message you have for women who may be experiencing a similar situation. Thank you so much for joining us this evening and sharing your stories with us. As they both said, there is help and resources available out there. You do not have to suffer in silence. The number to the New York City Domestic Violence Hotline is 1-800-621-HOPE. We'll be right back. There are compassionate people who allow themselves to be there for survivors and for victims in the form of counselors, advisors, and service workers day in and day out, who are deeply impacted by the difficult realities they help other people face in their lives. With that, I'd like to welcome Kim Cavern with Safe Horizon and Joyce Smith, the director of the Bronx Family Justice Center. Ladies, thank you so much for joining us. Kim, I'd like to start with you. Your staff and you as well, working at Safe Horizon, you hear these painful stories on a regular basis, and you say that it's possible that your staffers can experience something called vicarious trauma. Talk to me about that.
Yeah, so
Joyce, talk to me about what resources are available from the Bronx Family Justice Center for people who may be experiencing domestic violence. So Kim, for people who are working at the Justice Center, if they start to experience something like vicarious trauma, how do we start to correct that? How easy is it to coordinate with the other resources to get these people the help that they need? Is it oftentimes difficult because the cases can be so complex? Confidentiality is really important to them. Talk to me about how you guys make sure to safeguard that. I would imagine if you're dealing with a particularly complex case and a person is reticent to even come to you guys from the very beginning, and there are other organizations you would want to reach out to, how do you kind of respect the wishes of being confidential while still getting the help that somebody needs. After somebody comes to your center, they've gotten the information, they've spoken to maybe a counselor, and they go back home, what's the follow-up process? What happens after that? Kim? As Joyce and Kim mentioned, there are trained people out there ready and willing to help if you're dealing with domestic violence. Again, that number is at the bottom of your screen. It's 1-800-621-HOPE. Welcome back to Diva Talk. I'm Alisha Laventure. Diva Talk is a forum aimed at ending the epidemic of domestic violence here in the Bronx. Last year, 22 people were killed in family-related domestic violence situations, the highest of all 5 boroughs in New York City. At the bottom of your screen is the number to the New York City Domestic Violence Hotline. That number, again, is 1-800-621-HOPE. You've heard some very personal stories from our panelists, as well as some resources available to people to help them get out of an abusive relationship. Now we turn to people on the front lines, recognizing people who may be suffering in silence, vital forces who help people get the strength that they need and recognize the reality that they need to change their life and get some help. With that, I turn now to our panel. You work with residents and attendings at Bronx Lebanon Hospital to help them to recognize that someone, a patient who comes into the hospital, may be dealing with domestic violence. How do you prepare the doctors to deal with that kind of situation? What are some of the questions the doctors would be asking and the responses that they would be getting that would cue them to fill out that sort of electronic form to get some help for the patient? Now, what happens if the abuser is also in the room with the patient, the person who may be the victim of domestic violence? How would a doctor then recognize when the answers may not be so truthful? I would imagine even the story that brought the person to the hospital in the first place is kind of examined by the physician,
yes,
right?
because very often
The damaging effects of domestic violence are far-reaching. The abuse creates a wave that affects not only the people in the home, but loved ones outside of the home, and even counselors on the other end of a hotline. But you don't have to suffer in silence. Help is out there. Resources are out there. I'd like to thank our survivors who shared their very personal stories with us this evening. I'd also like to thank the other panelists who combat domestic violence with the work that they do every single day. I'd like to thank Pagoda's Theater for hosting us, and on behalf of News 12 The Bronx and the Bronx Borough President's Office, thank you for watching.